The familiar aroma of freshly baked bread wafted through the cozy bakery, a comforting scent that had greeted me every morning since childhood. As I stepped behind the counter to help my father, Jack, prepare for the day's rush, a pang of nostalgia tugged at my heart. This bakery, a cherished legacy passed down through generations, was more than just a business. It was a sanctuary, a place where the warmth of community and family intertwined. "Morning, sweetheart." Dad greeted me with a warm smile, his hands already dusted with flour from the early morning baking. "Ready for another busy day?" I nodded, tying my apron strings. "You know I am. The Harris Bakery wouldn't be the same without us." Dad chuckled, his eyes crinkling with pride. "Your mother would be so proud of you, Linda. She poured her heart into this place, and now it's our turn to keep her spirit alive." Memories of Mom's infectious laughter and her unwavering dedication to the bakery flooded my mind. Even after she passed away when I was just a teenager, her presence lingered in every nook and cranny, a constant reminder of the love and hard work that built this sanctuary. As the morning rush began, a steady stream of familiar faces filled the bakery, each greeted with a warm smile and a heartfelt exchange. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly widow from down the street, beamed as I handed her a freshly baked blueberry muffin, her favorite. Little Timmy, the rambunctious kid from the neighborhood, bounced excitedly as Dad slipped him an extra chocolate chip cookie, winking conspiratorially. These were the moments that made every early morning and late night worth it. The connections forged, the sense of belonging that transcended mere transactions. In a world that often felt cold and impersonal, our little bakery was a haven, a place where people could find solace in the simple pleasures of life. As the day wore on, my thoughts drifted to Mark, my husband of 2 years. We had met at the office where we both worked, and from the moment our eyes locked, I knew there was something special between us. His kind eyes and gentle demeanor had captured my heart, and I couldn't help but imagine a future filled with love and laughter by his side. Yet, even in the midst of our blissful union, a shadow loomed, the ever-present specter of Mark's mother, Evelyn. A woman of wealth and social standing, she had never approved of my humble roots or the bakery that meant so much to me. Her cutting remarks and disapproving glances had become a constant source of tension, driving a wedge between Mark and me. "Linda, if you truly loved me, you'd stand up to her." Mark's voice echoed in my mind, choked with frustration, his eyes pleading while my heart trembled between loyalty to my husband and fear of his mother's wrath. As the day drew to a close, and the last customer left with a warm pastry and a grateful smile, I found myself torn between the sanctuary of the bakery and the turmoil brewing in my personal life. But one thing was certain. I would not let Evelyn's disdain diminish the legacy my parents had built or the love that Mark and I shared. With a deep breath, I steeled my resolve, determined to find a way to bridge the divide and protect the things that mattered most. The sound of Evelyn's heels clicking against the hardwood floor announced her arrival before I even saw her. Mark tensed beside me, his hand gripping mine a little tighter as his mother swept into the living room, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer dress a stark contrast to our modest home. "Linda, darling." Evelyn greeted me with a forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I hope you're not planning on wearing something so plain for the wedding." I swallowed hard, feeling the familiar prickle of insecurity creep up my spine. "It's just a simple ceremony, Evelyn, nothing too extravagant." Her perfectly arched eyebrow raised ever so slightly, and I could practically hear the disdain dripping from her words. "Surely you don't expect my son to settle for a backyard affair. This is a Bryant wedding, after all." Mark shifted uncomfortably beside me, but before he could speak, Evelyn continued, "I've taken the liberty of booking the country club for the reception. It's a venue befitting our family's stature." My heart sank as I realized she had once again steamrolled over our plans, imposing her vision without regard for our wishes. Mark remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor, and I knew he wouldn't challenge his mother's decision. Evelyn's critical eye swept over our modest living room, her nose wrinkling ever so slightly. "I must say, Linda, I had hoped my son would have chosen a more suitable partner, one who could appreciate the finer things in life." Her words cut deep, striking at the very core of my insecurities. I had always taken pride in my humble upbringing and the values instilled by my father's bakery: hard work, community, and a deep appreciation for the simple pleasures in life. But in Evelyn's world, those virtues held no value. "Mother, that's enough." Mark finally spoke up, his voice strained, but Evelyn merely waved him off, her attention already shifting to the next item on her agenda. As she droned on about guest lists and seating arrangements, I felt myself retreating inward, my confidence withering under the weight of her constant criticism. Mark's hand remained limp in mine, a silent acknowledgement of his inability, or unwillingness, to stand up to his mother's overbearing presence. Later that evening, as Mark and I prepared for bed, the tension between us was palpable. I could see the conflict etched on his face, the struggle between his love for me and his deep-rooted fear of defying his mother's wishes. "Linda," he began, his voice heavy with resignation, "I know my mother can be difficult, but she means well in her own way." I fought back the bitter laugh that threatened to escape my lips. Evelyn's actions spoke louder than any well-intentioned words ever could. Her constant belittling, her disregard for our desires, and her relentless pursuit of social status had cast a dark shadow over what should have been one of the happiest times of our lives. "Does she, Mark?" I asked, my voice trembling with barely contained frustration. "Because from where I'm standing, it seems like she's more concerned with appearances than our happiness." Mark's shoulders slumped, and I could see the internal battle raging within him. In that moment, I realized that no matter how much he loved me, a part of him would always be tethered to his mother's expectations, her approval a coveted prize he could never quite attain. As I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, a seed of resentment took root within me. Evelyn's constant undermining had not only threatened my self-worth, but had also driven a wedge between Mark and me. I knew then that I couldn't simply stand by and let her dictate the course of our lives. For the sake of our marriage and my own sense of dignity, I would have to find a way to confront her toxic influence, even if it meant risking the wrath of the formidable Evelyn Bryant. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the house, and I knew without even answering that it was Evelyn, her perfectly manicured nails rapping impatiently against the doorframe. Mark shot me an apologetic glance as he rose to greet his mother, his shoulders already tensing in anticipation of her critique. "Linda, darling," Evelyn breezed in, her gaze sweeping over our modest living room with thinly veiled disdain. "I simply had to come by and discuss the guest list for the wedding." Before I could respond, she thrust a thick binder into my hands, the pages overflowing with names and addresses. "I've taken the liberty of inviting a few of my dearest friends and associates. After all, this is a Bryant wedding, and we must maintain a certain level of decorum." My heart sank as I flipped through the pages, recognizing none of the names, a veritable who's who of Evelyn's elite social circle. Gone was any semblance of the intimate gathering Mark and I had envisioned, replaced by a grandiose affair designed to showcase Evelyn's status and connections. "Evelyn, I appreciate your input, but Mark and I had hoped for something a bit more personal," I began, my voice wavering slightly under her steely gaze. "Nonsense, dear," she waved her hand dismissively. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. We simply must do it properly." Mark shifted uncomfortably beside me, his silence a deafening testament to his unwillingness to challenge his mother's authority. I could feel the frustration building within me, a simmering resentment at the way Evelyn steamrolled over our wishes, treating our wedding as a mere extension of her own social ambitions. "But what about my family and friends?" I pressed on, my voice growing stronger. "Shouldn't they be included as well?" Evelyn's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched ever so slightly, and I could practically hear the disdain dripping from her words. "Surely you don't expect to invite those common folk to such an esteemed occasion." The insult stung like a slap in the face, and I felt Mark tense beside me, his jaw clenching as he struggled to find the words to defend me. But before he could speak, Evelyn continued, her tone laced with condescension. "Darling, I'm only trying to ensure that this wedding reflects the Bryant family's standing in society. We can't have your little bakery friends cluttering up the guest list, now can we?" The air seemed to crackle with tension as her words hung between us, and I could feel the anger bubbling up within me, threatening to boil over. How dare she dismiss the very people who had been my rock, my support system, throughout my life? The loyal customers and cherished friends who had celebrated my triumphs and comforted me in my darkest moments, reduced to mere clutter in Evelyn's eyes. "That's enough, Mother," Mark finally spoke up, his voice strained but resolute. "Linda's family and friends are just as important as yours. This is our wedding, and we'll invite whoever we choose." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her perfectly painted lips pursing in disapproval. "Mark, darling, you can't be serious. These people are beneath us, and their presence will only serve to diminish the grandeur of the occasion." The words hung in the air like a slap, and I could feel the anger and hurt radiating from Mark as he struggled to maintain his composure. In that moment, I realized the true depth of Evelyn's disdain, not just for me, but for everything and everyone that didn't conform to her elitist ideals. As Evelyn continued to prattle on about seating arrangements and floral arrangements, her voice droning on like a persistent buzz, I felt a newfound resolve taking root within me. This was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives, a celebration of love and commitment, but Evelyn had twisted it into a twisted display of social climbing and one-upmanship. I would not stand idly by and let her trample over our dreams, our values, any longer. If Mark couldn't find the strength to stand up to his mother, then I would have to take matters into my own hands. The seeds of a plan began to germinate in my mind, a silent vow to reclaim our wedding and our lives from Evelyn's toxic grip. The familiar chime of the bakery's bell greeted me as I stepped inside, the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread instantly calming my frayed nerves. As I made my way behind the counter, exchanging warm greetings with the regulars, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. This was my sanctuary, a place where Evelyn's toxic influence held no sway. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" Dad's voice broke through my reverie, his brow furrowed with concern. "You seem a bit distracted today." I forced a smile, not wanting to burden him with the weight of my troubles. "Just wedding stress," I replied, hoping the half-truth would suffice. Dad's expression softened, and he reached out to give my hand a gentle squeeze. "Don't let that woman get you down, Linda. This is supposed to be a happy time for you and Mark." I nodded, swallowing the lump that had formed in my throat. If only he knew the extent of Evelyn's meddling, her relentless efforts to mold our wedding into a gaudy display of her own social standing. As the day wore on, and the familiar faces of our loyal customers streamed in and out, I found myself seeking solace in their warm smiles and friendly banter. These were the people who truly mattered, the ones who had been there for me through thick and thin, long before Evelyn's toxic presence had entered our lives. It was then that a seed of an idea began to take root in my mind. If Evelyn was determined to turn our wedding into a spectacle for her elite social circle, then perhaps it was time to remind her of the true power of community, the unbreakable bonds forged through shared experiences and unwavering support. That evening, as I closed up the bakery, I made a series of discreet phone calls, reaching out to those I knew I could trust implicitly. One by one, they agreed to meet me in secret, their voices brimming with concern and a shared determination to stand by my side. The following night, I found myself in the cozy living room of Mrs. Thompson, the elderly widow who had been a fixture at the bakery for as long as I could remember. Around me sat a small but formidable group, fellow customers, neighbors, and friends who had become like family over the years. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice trembling slightly with a mixture of nerves and resolve. "As you know, Evelyn has been difficult, to say the least, when it comes to the wedding plans." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, and I could see the shared frustration etched on their faces. They had all borne witness to Evelyn's disdain, her dismissive attitude toward the very community that had nurtured and supported me throughout my life. "She wants to turn our wedding into a gaudy display of wealth and status," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "But I won't let her diminish the love and support that you've all shown me over the years." Mrs. Thompson reached out and patted my hand, her eyes shining with determination. "We're with you, dear," she assured me. "That woman doesn't know the first thing about true family and community." One by one, they pledged their support, offering ideas and strategies to counter Evelyn's elitist machinations. From securing a prime location for the ceremony to rallying the local businesses to provide their services, a plan began to take shape. A plan to remind Evelyn that true strength lies not in wealth or social standing, but in the unbreakable bonds of community. As the meeting drew to a close, and I looked around at the faces of those who had become my chosen family, I felt a newfound sense of resolve. Evelyn might wield her wealth and influence like a weapon, but she had underestimated the power of genuine love and loyalty. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was determined to emerge victorious, not just for myself, but for the enduring spirit of community that had sustained me through every challenge life had thrown my way. The sound of Evelyn's shrill voice cut through the air like a knife, shattering the tentative peace that had settled over our weekly family dinner. "Honestly, Linda, must you insist on serving such pedestrian fare? One would think you'd have learned a thing or two about proper hosting by now." I felt the familiar sting of her words, the disdain dripping from every syllable as she eyed the simple spread of homemade dishes before her. Dad's jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the table, but before he could respond, Evelyn continued her tirade. "And this bakery," she sneered, her gaze sweeping over the quaint decor that had once filled me with such pride. "Surely you don't expect my son to be associated with such a common establishment." The air seemed to crackle with tension, and I could feel Mark's discomfort radiating from beside me. He opened his mouth as if to defend me, but the words never came, a silent testament to the hold his mother still had over him. "That's enough, Evelyn," Dad's voice boomed, startling us all with its sudden ferocity. "This bakery has been a cornerstone of our community for generations, and I'll not have you disrespect it, or my daughter, under my own roof." Evelyn's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched in surprise, her lips pursing into a thin line of disapproval. "Jack, darling, I'm merely trying to help Linda understand the expectations that come with being part of our family. Surely you can see how her humble beginnings might be a liability." The words hung in the air like a noxious cloud, and I could feel the anger and hurt radiating from Dad's every pore. This was more than just a petty insult. It was a direct attack on the very values and traditions that had sustained our family for generations. A liability? Dad's voice trembled with barely contained fury. "The only liability here is your complete lack of respect and decency. Linda is a kind, hard-working woman who embodies the true spirit of family and community, something you clearly know nothing about." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the tabletop in a display of barely restrained irritation. "How dare you speak to me in such a manner? I am merely trying to guide Linda toward a more refined way of life." "Refined?" Dad scoffed, his laughter tinged with bitterness. "You call belittling and demeaning others refined? Your idea of refinement is nothing more than a hollow facade, a desperate attempt to cling to a false sense of superiority." The words seemed to hang in the air, a palpable silence descending over the room as Evelyn's face flushed with indignation. For a moment I thought she might storm out, her pride too wounded to endure such a scathing rebuke. But then her expression hardened and she turned her icy gaze towards me. "Linda, darling, surely you don't agree with this outburst." Her voice was sickly sweet, laced with a subtle threat. "You know how important it is to maintain a certain level of decorum, especially with our upcoming nuptials." I felt the weight of her expectation pressing down on me, the unspoken demand that I choose between my father and the woman who would soon be my mother-in-law. But as I looked into Dad's eyes, shining with a fierce determination to protect me, I knew there was no choice to be made. "Evelyn," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil raging within me. "This bakery, this community, is a part of who I am, and if you can't respect that, then perhaps it's time you reevaluated your priorities." The words seemed to hang in the air, a silent challenge to the woman who had made it her mission to undermine and belittle everything I held dear. And in that moment, as Evelyn's face contorted with barely contained rage, I knew that the battle lines had been drawn. A silent vow to reclaim my dignity and protect the legacy that had sustained my family for generations. As the evening drew to a close and Evelyn swept out in a flurry of indignation, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The seeds of revenge had taken root. A quiet determination to turn the tables on the woman who had tried so desperately to break me. And with the unwavering support of my father and my community, I knew that victory was within reach. The morning of our wedding dawned with a palpable tension in the air, like the calm before a storm. As I slipped into my simple yet elegant gown, I couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation mingling with the excitement. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, a celebration of love and commitment, but Evelyn's looming presence cast a dark shadow over the proceedings. As I stepped out of the bridal suite, I was greeted by a flurry of activity. Evelyn's elite friends milling about, their designer dresses and expensive jewelry a stark contrast to the warm, familiar faces of my own community. It was as if two worlds had collided, and I found myself caught in the middle, torn between the opulence Evelyn craved and the genuine love and support that had sustained me throughout my life. "Linda, darling, you look absolutely radiant," Evelyn gushed, sweeping over to me with a forced smile plastered on her perfectly made-up face. "Although perhaps we could have done something a bit more elaborate with your hair." I fought back the urge to roll my eyes, reminding myself that today was about more than just appeasing Evelyn's whims. This was my day, our day, and I would not let her dampen the joy and significance of the occasion. As the ceremony began, I felt a sense of calm wash over me, bolstered by the presence of my father and the familiar faces of our loyal customers and friends. These were the people who truly mattered, the ones who had been there for me through thick and thin, long before Evelyn's toxic influence had entered our lives. And then, as if sensing my newfound resolve, Dad took the stage, his eyes shining with a mixture of pride and determination. "Friends, family, we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of two remarkable individuals," he began, his voice ringing out with a clarity and strength that belied his years. "But more than that, we are here to honor the enduring spirit of community, the bonds that transcend mere bloodlines and social status, forged through shared experiences, unwavering support, and a deep appreciation for the simple joys in life." I could see Evelyn's perfectly sculpted eyebrows knit together in confusion, her lips pursing ever so slightly as Dad's words washed over her like a gentle rebuke. "Linda and Mark have chosen to embark on this journey together, not just as husband and wife, but as partners in a legacy that stretches back generations," Dad continued, his gaze sweeping over the assembled crowd. "A legacy built on the values of hard work, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to those who truly matter, the people who have stood by their side through good times and bad." As Dad's speech reached its crescendo, I felt a surge of pride and gratitude swell within me. This was more than just a wedding ceremony. It was a defiant declaration of the strength and resilience that had sustained my family and our community for generations, a powerful rebuke to Evelyn's shallow obsession with status and wealth. And as I turned to face Mark, his eyes shining with a newfound understanding and respect, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, bolstered by the love and support of those who truly mattered, and the unbreakable spirit of community that had brought us to this moment. The reception was in full swing, the air thick with the mingled scents of expensive perfumes and the familiar aroma of freshly baked treats from the Harris Bakery. As I made my way through the crowd, exchanging warm embraces and heartfelt congratulations, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and vindication wash over me. Despite Evelyn's best efforts to turn our wedding into a gaudy display of wealth and status, the genuine love and support of my community had shone through, overshadowing her hollow network of social climbers. Their presence was a tangible reminder of the true strength that lay in the bonds of family and community, bonds that transcended mere bloodlines and social standing. As I caught sight of Evelyn, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer dress, a stark contrast to the warmth and simplicity that surrounded her, I steeled myself for the inevitable confrontation. She had been uncharacteristically subdued during the ceremony, no doubt stung by Dad's powerful speech and the outpouring of affection from our guests. But I knew better than to expect her to retreat quietly into the night. Evelyn was a woman accustomed to getting her way, and she would not relinquish her grip on power and control without a fight. Sure enough, As I approached the head table, her eyes narrowed, and she rose to her feet, a hush falling over the room as she cleared her throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just a moment." I felt Mark tense beside me, his hand tightening around mine as we braced ourselves for the onslaught. "As many of you know, I have had my reservations about this union," Evelyn began, her voice dripping with disdain. "Not because I harbor any ill will toward Linda, of course, but because I fear she may not be suited for the lifestyle that comes with being part of our family." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and I could feel the eyes of my community members burning into Evelyn, their silent support bolstering my resolve. "You see, the Bryant name carries with it a certain level of prestige, a certain expectation," Evelyn continued, her gaze sweeping over the assembled guests. "And while I'm sure Linda's humble upbringing has instilled in her a certain set of values, one can't help but wonder if she truly understands the responsibilities that come with our station." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and I could feel the anger and hurt radiating from Dad's every pore. But before he could respond, before the fury that had been simmering within me could boil over, a voice rang out from the crowd, clear, strong, and unwavering. "With all due respect, Mrs. Bryant," Mrs. Thompson, the elderly widow who had been a fixture at the bakery for as long as I could remember, stepped forward, her eyes shining with a fierce determination. "It seems to me that you're the one who doesn't understand the true meaning of family and community." A hush fell over the room as Evelyn's perfectly sculpted eyebrows knit together in confusion, her lips pursing ever so slightly. "Linda may not have been born into your world of wealth and privilege," Mrs. Thompson continued, her voice carrying a weight and authority that belied her years. "But she has something far more valuable, a deep appreciation for the bonds that truly matter, the ones forged through shared experiences, unwavering support, and a genuine love for the simple joys in life." One by one, the other members of our community stepped forward, their voices rising in a chorus of support, each sharing their own stories and memories of the warmth and kindness that Linda had brought into their lives. As the testimonials washed over me, I felt a surge of pride and gratitude swell within my chest. These were the people who had stood by me through thick and thin, who had seen me not just as a customer or a neighbor, but as a cherished member of their extended family. And as I turned to face Mark, his eyes shining with a newfound understanding and respect, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, bolstered by the love and support of those who truly mattered and the unbreakable spirit of community that had brought us to this moment. "Mother," Mark's voice rang out, clear and resolute, cutting through the din of the crowd. "I love you, and I will always be grateful for the opportunities you've provided me. But Linda is my wife, my partner, and my future. And if you cannot accept and respect that, then I'm afraid our paths must diverge." A collective gasp rippled through the room as Mark's words sank in, and I could see the color drain from Evelyn's face, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before our very eyes. "From this day forward, I will be taking Linda's surname," Mark declared, his hand tightening around mine in a silent vow of solidarity. "And I will embrace the values and traditions that have sustained her family for generations, values that you, regrettably, seem to have lost sight of." In that moment, as Evelyn stood frozen in stunned silence, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. The shackles of her toxic influence had been broken, and I was free to embrace the life I had always dreamed of. A life filled with love, laughter, and the unwavering support of a community that had become more than just neighbors, but a cherished extension of my family. The months following our wedding passed in a whirlwind of change and adjustment, but through it all, a sense of peace and contentment settled over our lives. With Evelyn's toxic influence finally banished, Mark and I were free to embrace the values and traditions that had sustained my family for generations. Gone were the days of walking on eggshells, constantly second-guessing ourselves to appease Evelyn's elitist whims. Instead, we found ourselves welcomed with open arms into the warm embrace of my community, their unwavering support and genuine affection a balm for the wounds inflicted by years of emotional turmoil. As we settled into our new life together, Mark threw himself wholeheartedly into the daily operations of the Harris Bakery, his natural affinity for numbers and business acumen proving invaluable as we explored ways to expand our reach and share our beloved treats with a wider audience. "You know, Linda," he mused one evening as we pored over the latest sales figures, a contented smile playing on his lips, "I never truly appreciated the magic of this place until now." I couldn't help but chuckle, remembering the disdain that had once clouded his perception, a byproduct of Evelyn's relentless pursuit of status and wealth. "Well, I'm just glad you finally saw the light." Mark's gaze softened, and he reached across the table to take my hand in his. "It's more than that," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This bakery, this community, it's a living, breathing embodiment of everything that truly matters in life. Love, loyalty, and the simple joys that money can't buy." As the weeks turned into months, the news of Evelyn's public humiliation and Mark's defiant stance spread like wildfire through her elite social circles. One by one, her so-called friends and associates began to distance themselves, their shallow allegiances crumbling in the face of her tarnished reputation. Meanwhile, our little bakery thrived, buoyed by the unwavering support of our community and the influx of curious newcomers drawn in by the tantalizing aromas and the promise of a warm, welcoming atmosphere. Dad, ever the visionary, saw an opportunity to expand our reach even further, and with Mark's business savvy and my deep-rooted knowledge of the bakery's operations, we embarked on an ambitious plan to open a second location in the heart of the city. The grand opening was a true celebration of our journey, a testament to the resilience and determination that had carried us through the darkest of times. As the ribbon was cut and the doors swung open, a sea of familiar faces greeted us, their smiles and well wishes a poignant reminder of the unbreakable bonds that had sustained us. In the years that followed, our little bakery empire continued to grow, each new location a beacon of hope and community in a world that often felt cold and impersonal. And through it all, Mark and I remained steadfast in our commitment to the values that had brought us together: hard work, loyalty, and an unwavering appreciation for the simple pleasures in life. As I watched Dad play with our children in the warm, golden light of the bakery's kitchen, their laughter mingling with the familiar scents of freshly baked bread and sugary confections, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. This was the life I had always dreamed of, a life filled with love, laughter, and the unwavering support of a community that had become more than just neighbors, but a cherished extension of our family. And in those quiet moments as the world outside faded into the background, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, bolstered by the strength and resilience that had carried us through the darkest of times and the enduring spirit of community that had become the very foundation of our lives.